The world had always been a place of routine. People went to work, studied, and lived their lives in a predictable cycle. Yet for some, everything was about to change. The sky above Earth was calm, and the planet seemed at peace. But deep beneath the surface of this normality, something was stirring, a force that had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. This is the story of how humanity learned they were not just ordinary humans, but something much more powerful. It started with strange dreams. At first, they were so vivid that people couldn't shake them off. In these dreams, they saw battles, huge wars fought on distant planets. They saw themselves as soldiers, wearing armor, carrying weapons, and fighting against alien creatures. It was all so real, yet they had never seen anything like it before. And the strange part was, they didn't know why they had these dreams. They felt familiar, as if they had been a part of them all along. Sarah, a young woman from a small town, woke up one morning with a feeling she couldn't explain. Her mind was racing. She had just had the most vivid dream, where she was on a battlefield, leading a squad of soldiers. She could still remember the feeling of the weapon in her hand, the rush of the fight, the scent of smoke in the air. She had never been to a battlefield in her life. She was just a school teacher, or at least she had been. The dreams weren't just happening to Sarah. All over the world, people were experiencing the same thing. There was an energy in the air, an unspoken connection between people who had never met before. They began to exchange stories, and it quickly became clear that they were all remembering the same things. Some people remembered fighting alongside others on foreign worlds. Others recalled advanced technology, ships that traveled across the galaxy. They all felt the same thing. Something was missing. They knew there was more to their lives, but they didn't know how or why. And then it happened. One night, while Sarah was asleep, a voice echoed in her mind. It was soft, but powerful. She heard it as clearly as if it was spoken aloud. You were made for war. The voice was calm, and it wasn't just speaking to her. It was speaking to everyone. Millions of people across the world heard it at the same time. And for the first time, they understood what they were. They had been created for a purpose. Warriors, designed for battle. The memories that had been awakening in their minds were no accident. They had been trained for something, and now it was time for them to remember. Sarah shot up from her bed, gasping for air. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and for the first time, she felt the power that had always been inside of her. She wasn't just a teacher anymore. She wasn't just an ordinary human. She was something more. She had been created for a reason, and that reason was about to become clear. Across the world, people were feeling the same change. Some were scared, others were confused, but there was a feeling of unity that spread like wildfire. They were no longer just humans. They were something more. They were warriors. And they were ready to fight. But who had created them? Why? And what was the purpose of these strange memories? As they began to piece together the truth, they realized the terrifying answer. They weren't the only species in the galaxy. There were others, alien species, who had been watching humanity from afar. And they had been planning something. The humans were not just soldiers. They were created for a war much bigger than they could imagine. In the days that followed, news reports flooded the media, showing strange lights in the sky. Ships, massive ships, began to appear in Earth's atmosphere. These were not like anything humanity had ever seen before. The ships were alien, and they carried a message that no one expected. The message was clear and simple. We created you. Now we're taking you back. The world went silent. Governments scrambled to respond, but they knew they were powerless against the alien ships. The people of Earth had no choice but to come together. They had been created for a reason. They were warriors, and now they would have to prove it. The awakening had begun. The humans who had once lived in peace were now forced to face the truth about who they really were. They had been created for war. The memories they had unlocked were not just dreams. They were the history of their true purpose. They were the soldiers who would fight to protect their world. And soon, the galaxy would learn that humans were not to be underestimated. But there was something else. As the humans looked to the sky, they realized that the battle was not going to be easy. These aliens were powerful, but the humans had something that the aliens didn't expect: each other. They had their strength, their unity, and the will to fight for their future. The awakening was just the beginning. As humanity stood on the edge of this new reality, the world was filled with uncertainty. The truth had been revealed. They had not just been born, but created. Their memories, their skills, their entire existence had been designed by an alien species. For years, they had lived unaware of their true origins, but now they faced the terrifying truth. They had been made to be warriors, and now their creators had returned to reclaim control. The alien ships that had appeared in the sky were massive, their shapes sleek and intimidating. They hovered above Earth's cities, casting long shadows over the planet. People were terrified, unsure of what would happen next. Would they be enslaved? Would they be forced to fight for the aliens again? The questions lingered and fear spread across the globe like wildfire. But then, the creators spoke. Through loudspeakers on the ships, their voices echoed across Earth. They spoke in a language that humans could not understand at first, but as the transmissions continued, they began to translate. The creators introduced themselves as the HFY, an ancient alien species that had wandered the stars for eons. They had been the ones to design humanity, molding them into perfect warriors who could one day fight in their intergalactic wars. You were created to fight, the HFY's leader, known as Theric, said in a deep, commanding voice. You were made for war, and now the galaxy needs you. The time has come for you to fulfill your purpose. Join us, and together we will conquer the stars, resist, and face annihilation. The message was clear. Humanity was not free. They were property, created to serve the HFY in their endless wars. The aliens offered them a choice: join them and fight for the galaxy, or face extinction. But the humans were not as weak as the HFY had fought. In the days that followed, they came together, organizing in secret. Groups of people, once ordinary civilians, now trained as soldiers. They were remembering their combat training, their knowledge of advanced technology, and the strength that had been implanted into them. No longer would they be pawns in someone else's game. The humans had awakened to their true potential. Sarah, who had felt the power awaken inside her in the first part of this journey, now stood among the leaders of the resistance. She wasn't alone. Across the world, people were stepping up. Teachers, doctors, farmers, soldiers, united by the knowledge that they had been created for a purpose. But that purpose no longer belonged to the HFY. Sarah knew the truth. The HFY had come back to claim control, but they had underestimated humanity. They had created warriors, yes, but they had also created something more. Humans were survivors. They were fighters, and they would never submit to anyone's control. We were born to fight, yes, Sarah said to the resistance leaders. But we were also born to protect, and we will fight for Earth, for our freedom. Across the globe, similar conversations were happening. People were uniting, preparing for what was to come. Earth had never faced a challenge like this before, but humanity had the advantage now. The creators might have designed them as warriors, but they had never accounted for one thing: the human spirit. The resistance began to grow. Underground bases were established. New weapons were forged from the remnants of alien technology. And in secret, humanity's true warriors trained, preparing for the coming war. They knew what the HFY had planned, but they also knew that their creators had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the power of their creation. The HFY might have given humanity their strength, their combat skills, and their memories of battle. But they had also given them the drive to protect their home, their families, and everything they held dear. And that was something that HFY couldn't understand. Humanity's will to fight for what was right was stronger than any weapon or power. In the midst of preparing for battle, Sarah received a message. A small group of Zalfar soldiers had landed in a remote part of the world. They were searching for a way to break the human resistance. But Sarah knew this was the first step. Small, isolated, and fragile, but a sign that the Zalfar were testing humanity's resolve. With a steady heart, Sarah spoke to the resistance. The Zalfar think they can control us, but they are wrong. This is just the beginning. We are more than warriors. We are humans, and we will never back down. As humanity prepared for the upcoming conflict, Sarah couldn't help but feel a rush of anticipation. She had felt the power growing inside of her, and she knew the others felt the same. This was a war for survival, for freedom, and for the future of Earth. The Zalfar had returned to reclaim their creation, but what they didn't know was that humanity had already begun to reclaim their destiny. The war had only just begun, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when humanity fought back. The fight for control had begun. The day the first battle began, no one was ready. Earth had never experienced anything like this. The humans had just begun to understand their power, their purpose. The Zalfar had come to reclaim them as warriors, to use them for their endless wars. But the humans had other plans. It started with a single, sudden attack. The Zalfar had underestimated how quickly the humans would unite. The first group of alien soldiers that landed on Earth's surface had been sent to crush the Resistance's leaders and break their morale. They were powerful, armed with technology the humans had never seen before. But the humans weren't afraid. They were ready. They had trained for this moment, even if they hadn't known it until now. Sarah, who had become one of the Resistance's leaders, was among the first to respond. A small team of human soldiers was stationed in a remote outpost on Earth's surface. They had been monitoring the arrival of the alien soldiers, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Zalfar forces were focused on their mission, destroying the human resistance. They hadn't expected humans to fight back so fiercely. As Sarah's team approached the landing site of the alien soldiers, she felt the pulse of her power inside. It was as if her every instinct was sharpened, ready to react, ready to kill. The memories of the battles she had never fought were now clearer than ever. She felt the weight of her weapon in her hand, and she knew this fight would determine the future of Earth. If they lost this battle, the entire world would fall under Zalfar control. With a single signal, Sarah's team moved into position. They had studied the alien tactics, learned from the few skirmishes they had with the Zalfar in the past weeks. They were not as outmatched as they seemed. The humans had begun to adapt and use the alien technology left behind from previous battles. In the blink of an eye, Sarah's team engaged. Laser weapons fired, explosions rang out, and the ground shook as the battle began in full force. The alien soldiers were strong, skilled in combat, and equipped with advanced armor. But the humans had something more: their experience, their unity, and their undying will to protect their home. Sarah charged into the battle, her heart pounding. The aliens shot at her, but her movements were faster. She dodged their attacks and fired back with precision, taking down one alien soldier after another. She could feel the energy inside her guiding her actions, a gift from her creators. But now, it was hers to control. The humans' resistance was fierce. They didn't fight like pawns, as the Zalfar had hoped. They fought like warriors. The aliens underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and strategize. Within hours, the small resistance team had destroyed a significant portion of the alien force. Sarah couldn't believe how quickly the battle had turned in their favor. The aliens, once so confident in their superiority, were now retreating. But this wasn't the end. Sarah knew that this was only the first clash, a small skirmish in a much larger war. The Zalfar would return with more soldiers, more powerful weapons. This was just the beginning. But it was a victory, and it was the first sign that humanity had more strength than the Zalfar had ever expected. In the aftermath of the battle, Sarah's team surveyed the wreckage of the alien ships and the fallen soldiers. The victory was hard-won, but it was a clear message. The humans were not going to lie down and be controlled. They were warriors, just as they had been made to be. And no matter how powerful the HFY thought they were, they could never take away the one thing that made humanity stronger than anything else: its spirit. As Sarah looked at the battlefield, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had led her team to victory, and for the first time, she felt truly alive. She knew there would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face, but she also knew that the humans weren't alone. Together, they would face whatever the HFY threw at them. This was their fight now. The humans were not just warriors. They were the protectors of their world, and they would never stop fighting. The war had only just begun, but the HFY would soon learn that Earth's warriors were not so easily defeated. With one battle behind them, Sarah knew that the next would be even harder. But the humans had proven something. They were not just the creations of the HFY. They were the warriors who would defend their planet, no matter what it took. The first victory had been a spark of hope for humanity. After the clash, morale was high, and the humans felt they were finally on equal footing with the aliens. However, the HFY were not the kind to retreat quietly. The first battle had been a skirmish, but it had shaken their confidence. The next wave of HFY soldiers would be different. They would be better prepared, stronger, and relentless. The HFY leader, Therek, stood at the command center of his warship, staring down at Earth's surface. His mind was filled with rage. He had underestimated humanity, believing them to be nothing more than mere pawns, created to fight his wars. But now, the humans had shown their true strength, and that made them dangerous. Therek couldn't afford to allow this rebellion to spread. If Earth's resistance continued to grow, it could signal the collapse of his empire. "We will crush them," Therek growled to his officers. "Prepare the next wave. These humans will learn that they are nothing compared to the power of the HFY." Back on Earth, Sarah and the Resistance were not resting on their laurels. They had won the first battle, but they knew the HFY would come back stronger. The victory had sparked hope, but it had also brought attention. The alien forces would soon regroup, and Earth would be under attack once again. Sarah's team had grown, as more humans joined the Resistance. People from all walks of life, farmers, scientists, engineers, had come together, offering their skills and knowledge. They worked around the clock, preparing for the next confrontation. The Resistance built hidden bases in the mountains, underground bunkers, and fortified cities. They studied the alien technology they had salvaged from the battlefields, learning how to turn the HFY's weapons against them. But despite all their efforts, Sarah knew the next battle wouldn't be easy. The HFY were relentless, and they would not hesitate to do whatever it took to regain control. As she stood in the command center of the human resistance, she felt the weight of the upcoming war pressing on her. The next clash could be humanity's final stand. It wasn't long before the HFY launched their retaliation. A fleet of warships descended upon Earth's atmosphere, their dark forms blotting out the sun. The HFY had come with everything they had. Sarah's heart raced as she saw the ships in the sky. It was no longer just a small invasion. They were here to wipe out the Resistance, to take Earth back under their control. "Everyone, get ready," Sarah shouted as alarms blared throughout the Resistance base. "This is it. They're coming for us." The humans scrambled to their posts. Weapons were loaded, shields were activated, and the air was filled with the sound of preparation. Sarah and her team donned their combat armor, checking their weapons and equipment. They had learned from their first battle. They had to be smarter this time. The HFY had the technology and firepower, but humanity had something even more powerful: the will to fight for their home. As the HFY ships approached, the sky crackled with energy. Massive bombardments from space rained down on Earth, and the ground trembled under the force of the explosions. Cities were destroyed, and buildings collapsed in an instant. The Xalthar had no mercy, and their attack was swift and brutal. Sarah's team was ready. They had planned for this day, and they knew they had to strike quickly before the alien forces could establish a stronghold on Earth. The humans launched their counterattack with precision. They used the alien technology they had learned to reverse engineer, turning the Xalthar's own weapons against them. The tide of battle was turning once again, but this time it was a harder fight. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Humans fought in the streets, in the forests, in the skies. Every part of Earth was a battlefield. The Xalthar were relentless, their soldiers charging forward with brutal efficiency, but the humans were fighting back with everything they had. Each human warrior was fueled by the knowledge that they were not just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their freedom, their families, and their world. Sarah and her team were in the thick of the battle, dodging blasts and returning fire. It felt like the world was on fire around them. But Sarah didn't hesitate. She had led her people to victory once before, and she would do it again. She had something that Xalthar could never understand: the human spirit. No matter how powerful their weapons were, no matter how vast their empire, they could not break the will of humanity. The ground shook as explosions rocked the battlefield. The Xalthar continued to press their attack, but the humans were holding their own. They were fighting with everything they had, and they weren't giving up. The battle was far from over, but Sarah could feel a shift. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were thriving in the face of destruction. And with each passing hour, they grew stronger. They had learned from their creators, but they had also learned from each other. Together, they would push back the Xalthar. The first retaliation was harsh, but humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The Xalthar would soon learn that the battle for Earth was not one they could win. Humans were more than just warriors. They were the true masters of their fate. And no matter what the Xalthar threw at them, humanity would never surrender. The war was just beginning, and the Xalthar's retaliation had only fueled the fire of humanity's resolve. After the Xalthar's brutal retaliation, Earth lay in ruins. The humans had fought back fiercely, but the cost had been immense. Cities burned, lives were lost, and the land was scared by the battle. Yet through the smoke and debris, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. If anything, the Xalthar's attack had done one thing. It had united Earth's people like never before. The survivors, the warriors, and the scientists all came together with a single purpose: to drive the Xalthar off their planet once and for all. Sarah stood before the Resistance's command center, her face covered in soot, her hands calloused from battle. She had seen the worst of what the Xalthar could do, but she had also seen the resilience of her people. She could feel the energy of the human spirit coursing through her veins. The time had come for them to take the fight to the Xalthar, to launch a full-scale counteroffensive. "We've learned from their attacks," Sarah said to her commanders, her voice steady and firm. "We know how they operate, and now we can hit them where it hurts. It's time to take the fight to them. We'll show them that Earth will never bow to the Xalthar." The Resistance had spent the days following the Xalthar's bombardment regrouping. They had scavenged alien technology from the wreckage of the previous battles and used it to build new weapons, vehicles, and defenses. The humans were learning quickly, adapting to the advanced technology that the Xalthar had once believed would give them total control. But it wasn't just technology that made humanity a formidable foe. It was their unity. The humans had come together as one, no longer divided by borders or politics. They were all fighting for the same cause: the survival of their species and their planet. This sense of solidarity gave them a strength that Xalthar could never understand. The counteroffensive was a well-planned operation. It began with a series of covert strikes against the Xalthar supply lines and communication hubs. The Resistance infiltrated enemy territory, sabotaging their war machines and cutting off their reinforcements. The Xalthar were caught off guard by the sudden assault. They had underestimated the humans' ability to organize and strike with precision. Sarah led a team of elite soldiers into the heart of one of the Salfar's strongholds. They had learned from their previous battles, and now they knew how to exploit the aliens' weaknesses. The humans used their own advanced weapons to disable the Salfar's energy shields, rendering them vulnerable to direct attack. As Sarah and her team infiltrated the enemy base, she could feel the adrenaline pumping through her. They moved with stealth and precision, taking out alien sentries and planting explosives in key areas. They knew the clock was ticking. Once the explosives were set, they would have only minutes to escape before the entire facility went up in flames. The tension was palpable as they made their way through the dark corridors of the Salfar base. The hum of alien machinery echoed through the halls, a constant reminder of the overwhelming power that Salfar had once thought they held over the humans. But now, that power was slipping away. The resistance had become stronger with each passing day, and Sarah felt confident that the Salfar were no longer invincible. They reached the core of the base, where the main reactor was located. Sarah glanced at her team, and with a silent nod, they planted the final set of explosives. The countdown began. "Let's move," Sarah whispered. As they made their way back toward the exit, the base began to shake. The explosions had set off a chain reaction, and the facility was crumbling. Sarah's heart raced as she led her team out of the collapsing base. They had only moments to escape before the entire structure would be destroyed. Outside, the sky was filled with the sounds of battle. The Salfar had launched their retaliation, but the humans were ready. The resistance had launched a full-scale offensive, attacking alien strongholds around the world. The Salfar were being driven back, their once proud empire crumbling before the might of the human counteroffensive. As Sarah and her team sprinted toward their extraction point, she could hear the roar of explosions in the distance. The humans were fighting with everything they had. And the Salfar were starting to realize something they hadn't considered before. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving. They were no longer the creations of the Salfar. They were the creators of their own destiny. The counteroffensive was a success. The Salfar had been dealt a major blow, and their grip on Earth was weakening. But the war was far from over. Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. The humans had shown their strength, but the Salfar would not give up easily. The coming battles would be harder, and the stakes would be higher. But as Sarah looked out at the battlefield, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The Salfar had come to Earth thinking they could control the humans. But in the end, it was the humans who would decide their own fate. And as the counteroffensive raged on, Sarah could feel the fire of victory burning inside her. The Salfar had underestimated humanity's power. And now, they would pay the price. The tide of the war had shifted. The humans were no longer simply defending their world. They were actively pushing back the Salfar invaders, retaking territory, and weakening the enemy's forces. The Salfar were beginning to panic, unsure how to deal with the ferocity of their human opponents. But despite the victories, Sarah knew that the war was not yet over. The final battle was approaching, and it would determine the fate of Earth and humanity's place in the galaxy. After the last major victory, Sarah and the resistance leaders gathered in their command center. Maps of Earth, intergalactic communication data, and reports from their soldiers were spread out before them. They had learned much from the alien technology they had captured, and they had grown in strength with each passing day. But even with all the progress, Sarah knew the Salfar were far from defeated. Their arrogance had cost them dearly, but their resources and determination were still a threat. "We've done well," Sarah said as she addressed the commanders. "But the Salfar will be back. They're regrouping for one final push. We need to make sure this last strike counts." The room fell silent, the weight of the situation heavy in the air. Every leader knew what was at stake. If the humans failed now, it could mean the extinction of their species, or worse, the subjugation of Earth to the will of the Salfar. Sarah stared at the map of Earth. The Xalfar had one remaining stronghold on the planet, a massive, heavily fortified base hidden deep within the Arctic Circle. The aliens had concentrated their final forces there, preparing for the last stand. The humans had to strike hard and fast, catching them by surprise before the Xalfar could regroup and launch another attack. "We have one shot at this," Sarah said firmly. "If we can destroy their stronghold, we'll cripple their ability to fight back. This will be the blow that ends the war." The resistance forces had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Their best soldiers were selected, and the brightest scientists had designed a plan to infiltrate and destroy the Xalfar's final ace. They would need to break through the enemy's defenses and deliver a powerful strike to the heart of the base. But they had learned that brute force wasn't enough. They needed to be smart, strategic, and precise. Sarah's team was ready. She was joined by some of the most skilled fighters and strategists in the resistance. Each one of them had a personal stake in this war, and they were determined to bring the fight to an end. The operation began under the cover of darkness. The Xalfar stronghold was hidden beneath layers of ice and rock, making it nearly impossible to locate. But the humans had the advantage of their knowledge, and they had successfully traced the alien signals to the site. As Sarah and her team descended into the frigid Arctic landscape, the tension was palpable. They had no idea what awaited them at the base, but they knew the stakes. The team moved stealthily, using advanced cloaking technology to avoid detection. The Xalfar's security systems were sophisticated, but the humans had learned how to bypass them. As they approached the entrance to the base, Sarah's heart raced. This was it, the moment they had all been preparing for. She glanced at her team, their faces grim but resolute. There was no turning back now. They infiltrated the base, disabling the security systems and silently neutralizing the guards. The air inside was cold, and the hum of alien machinery echoed through the corridors. It was a stark reminder of how far the Xalfar had come in their conquest. But the humans had come even further. They were ready for this fight. After navigating the maze of tunnels, the team reached the central core of the stronghold. The Xalfar were preparing for their final counterattack, but they didn't realize they were about to be struck from within. Sarah and her team planted explosive charges at key locations, priming them for detonation. But they had one final task: destroying the alien reactor that powered the entire base. If they succeeded in destroying it, the Xalfar's war machine would be rendered useless. As the team worked to complete their mission, the Xalfar began to realize something was wrong. Alarms began to blare, and the enemy forces scrambled to mount a defense. But it was too late. The human team had already set the charges. The countdown began. "Time to go," Sarah whispered, as the explosives were triggered. The base shook violently, and alarms blared as the entire structure began to collapse. The humans rushed toward the exit, fighting their way through the increasingly frantic Xalfar soldiers. Explosions rocked the base, and the walls trembled as the enemy's last line of defense crumbled. They reached the surface, where their extraction ship was waiting. As they boarded, Sarah looked back at the chaos unfolding beneath them. The Xalfar's stronghold was engulfed in flames, the once imposing structure now nothing more than a smoldering wreck. The battle wasn't over, but this victory was significant. The Xalfar had lost their most important base, and their leadership would be in disarray. As the humans flew away from the battlefield, they knew that the war was nearing its end. The Xalfar were no longer the unbeatable force they had once been. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight, and to win. Sarah looked around at her team, their faces filled with exhaustion, but also determination. They had fought for this moment, and they had earned it. The final stand was over, but the war was still far from won. The Xalfar would retaliate, but humanity would be ready. The next chapter of the war was approaching, and Sarah knew that humanity's greatest strength had always been their resilience. They had taken a step closer to victory, and nothing would stop them now. The destruction of the Xalfar's final stronghold sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time since their invasion began, the alien invaders were on the defensive. Their empire, built on cruelty and conquest, was crumbling before the relentless drive of humanity. The Xalfar had underestimated the human spirit, and now they were paying the price. But even with their empire fractured, the war was far from over. The battle for Earth had reached its final stages, and Sarah knew that the coming days would be decisive. The Xalfar were regrouping, their military forces scattered, but their thirst for revenge was growing stronger by the hour. The humans had dealt them a major blow, but the Xalfar would never stop fighting until they were completely defeated. Humanity had come a long way since the first days of the invasion. No longer the helpless prey they had once been. Humans were now a force to be reckoned with. Their unity, determination, and resourcefulness had turned the tide of war. But as the final battle loomed, Sarah could feel the weight of what was to come. She knew this would be the ultimate test of everything they had fought for. The Resistance's leadership convened one last time. It was a somber meeting, the faces around the table filled with exhaustion, but also a fierce resolve. Earth's survival depended on their actions in the coming days. If they failed, everything they had worked for would be lost. Sarah stood at the head of the table, her voice calm but full of determination. "This is it," Sarah said. "The Xalfar have nothing left to lose. We've taken their strongholds, crippled their forces, and exposed their weaknesses. But they still have one thing left, their last remaining fleet. They're planning to launch a final assault on Earth, and we need to stop them before they can strike." The plan was bold, but it was the only option left. The human forces would need to destroy the Xalfar's remaining fleet before it could reach Earth. The Resistance had gathered all of their remaining ships, weaponry, and fighters for one final strike. They would have to infiltrate the enemy's last stronghold in space, bypassing their defenses, and launch a direct assault on the Xalfar's flagship, the heart of their fleet. The humans had become experts in guerrilla warfare and space combat, using alien technology they had reproposed. Their strategy was to break through the Xalfar's defenses and hit their fleet from within. But it would be a dangerous mission. The risks were high, but the reward was even higher. This was their chance to finally end the war. Sarah and her team were assigned to lead the strike on the flagship. They boarded their ship, ready for the final mission. As they approached the enemy fleet, the vastness of the challenge became clear. Hundreds of Xalfar warships were orbiting the planet, their weapons powered up and ready to strike. But the humans had one advantage: the element of surprise. With precision and speed, the human forces breached the Xalfar fleet's outer defenses. The Xalfar didn't expect the humans to launch such a bold attack so soon after their last defeat. The humans struck first, disabling several enemy ships with carefully planned attacks on their weak points. The battle was intense, with Xalfar ships firing relentlessly, but the humans were determined. They had been in this fight for too long to give up now. Sarah's heart raced as she led her team toward the flagship. The Xalfar were desperate, fighting harder than ever to protect their last remaining asset. But the humans were relentless. With every strike, they chipped away at the alien defenses, pushing forward toward their goal. Finally, after what seemed like hours of battle, they reached the flagship. It was massive, a towering fortress in space, surrounded by smaller ships and defensive systems. But the humans were ready. Sarah and her team infiltrated the flagship, disabling its power core and setting explosives in key locations. The countdown had begun. As the explosions rocked the massive ship, Sarah knew this was it, the final moment. They had done what seemed impossible, but now they had to make it out alive. The Xalfar were scrambling to defend their flagship, but it was too late. The explosives detonated, and the flagship began to implode, taking down the rest of the fleet with it. Sarah and her team barely escaped the destruction, their ship taking heavy damage as they broke through the debris field. But they had done it. The Xalfar fleet was destroyed, and their ability to launch any further attacks on Earth was gone. As the dust settled, Sarah looked out at the vastness of space. The battle was over. The war was won. Humanity had triumphed over the invaders who had once thought they could dominate the galaxy. But Sarah knew that this victory had come at a great cost. Many lives had been lost, and the planet would never be the same. Yet, humanity had proven something undeniable. They would not be enslaved. They would not be exterminated. They were the true warriors of the galaxy. The human forces returned to Earth, where they were greeted as heroes. The war had torn the planet apart, but it had also united humanity in a way that had never been seen before. The people of Earth had fought not just for survival, but for the freedom to live as they chose, to shape their own destiny. As Sarah stood among her fellow soldiers, looking out at the horizon, she knew that Earth's future was bright. They had faced their darkest hour and come out victorious. Now, it was time to rebuild, to make sure that nothing like this would ever happen again. Humanity had faced their worst nightmare and come through stronger than ever. The galaxy would remember this war for eons to come, the day humanity, the warriors created by the HFY, took control of their own fate and secured their place in the stars. The war had ended, but humanity's story was just beginning.